You're watching a clip from the Football Ramble podcast. For the full episode, search Football Ramble wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes out Monday to Friday. Okay, on with the show.
This is the big story from the weekend. Obviously, Brendan Rodgers sat by Leicester earlier on Sunday, and then later on in the day, Graham Potter sacked by Chelsea, less than 7 months in charge. He'd won just 3 games in his last 11 matches in all competitions and only 7 wins in his 22 Premier League games in charge. Simply not good enough, according to Chelsea.
No, well, I mean, it wasn't good enough, was it? But I think the situation is, like, people wondered, is this job too big for Potter? That when he came in, that was the concern, wasn't it? But the circumstances have essentially been too ridiculous. Could anyone succeed in this environment where Todd Boehly is working everything out as he goes along? Just throw in players at a situation. It's like they're going, oh, this guy's really good at getting F1 to thrive, so let's give him a submarine and a helicopter and a rally car. Just use them. Look, we've got some more stuff. Yeah. It's just like the parameters under which he had to work are so weird and unusual that I suppose wrestling that into any sort of coherence has clearly been impossible. I mean, he didn't do a good job even in those circumstances, clearly, but I mean, it was never going to go any way other than this. And you wonder about the replacement as well. Is Todd Boehly actually going to do his kind of due diligence on whoever comes in? You know, Julian Nagelsmann is someone who is going to want a professional setup, who is going to want everyone pulling in the same direction and is going to want some coherence. And obviously, I mentioned him as he's the front runner in the rumours at the moment. But is that appealing to anyone right now? I'm sure the money's appealing and that's a big payoff if it doesn't work out.
That's the thing. I think, for all the stick that Abramovich got for the way he ran the club, and they were obviously successful, and who knows if they would have been more successful if he was less trigger happy with his managers. Don't think he ever fired two managers in one season, which is kind of interesting when you think about what people were trying to predict the Todd Boehly reign was going to be like. And there are managers who are, to be frank, who are at the same time who are bigger than Potter is in terms of reputation and achievements, that have found it tough at the circus that Chelsea can be. I mean, Big Phil Scolari is one that springs to my mind. That was a long time ago now, but he didn't last very, very long either. So I feel like Jim's right. I think the situation there was such a maelstrom, such a kind of a storm of activity, that I think it would be very, very difficult for any manager, despite one that's never really managed at a truly big club, to achieve there. I don't think it's any. But by the way, I don't think it's a huge blow to Potter's reputation, though.
No, despite the poor run of results that I've just run through there, I was actually surprised by this sacking personally, because I felt like all along since he was appointed back in September, the narrative from the club has always been this is a long-term project, and they stuck with him when they went on a poor run earlier on in the season. Then they put together a few results, didn't they? And then it went bad again. And they still stuck with him. And I kind of just felt that they were going to stick with him, and that everyone was saying he needs time. He's that sort of manager that needs time. And I've seen that firsthand at Brighton. He needed time to do what he did with our team when he was the Brighton manager. And I just expected that. I didn't expect him to go this season. Perhaps if these results carried on into next season, maybe I thought that they'd make a change then. So to me, the timing of this, I feel like Todd Boehly already knows who the replacement is. And I feel like he's done this now because he wants to hijack the Nagelsmann potential deal from Spurs.
That's possible. I think if he got an opportunity to get Nagelsmann and he thought that he had to do it quickly and he couldn't hang around, maybe that informs the decision. Ironically, they haven't lost. It's the first game they lost for a month or so, Chelsea. But when you read what was going on at the club and read what was happening behind the scenes, it doesn't make for great reading. I mean, it doesn't make for great reading when you hear some of the players didn't even really know who he was when they were coming in.
Can that be true?
Well, that's what people are saying. I mean, it's what's being reported by reputable outlets, and also there's talk of him having the piss taken out of him behind his back and all that awful stuff that you can imagine happens at football clubs. But the key point here, I think, is the one Jim opened with, which is the fact that it's chaos there. The amount of incomings and outgoings over and over again, it's just very difficult to understand how anyone could succeed in that kind of situation. There's so many players come in, and I wonder even if a top manager who's used to dealing with really big names like Ancelotti, who's obviously had some success at Chelsea, could have even dealt with that. Let alone Graham Potter, who maybe they just thought was never really going to get the purchase on the club that that he needed and was never really ever going to turn it around. And I think I know you say you're surprised by it, Jules, but it's actually quite difficult to envisage him making it better if you're honest with yourself. And I also think it was tough for him as well. Yeah. I think you look at he wore every part of stress all over his face. He looked about 15 years older. Having taken the job and done 7 months of it, it just seemed very, very tough for him. And I think as Miguel Delaney said, perhaps he needed a job in between Brighton and Chelsea to help him make that step.
Or just stay at Brighton and take us further.
Bitterness.
That's not bitter.
Bitterness. Worked out well for you.
It has worked out well for us. And look, and I've said this.
Brighton got like 20-odd million for it, didn't they?
21, I think.
Yeah.
For every win that Potter got at Chelsea, it's cost 3.1 million that we've got. Seven wins in the Premier League he got. Wow. So 3 million per win. Thank you very much. Look, I've said this before. I really like Graham Potter. He did brilliantly for Brighton. And I like him as a person as well. I've been fortunate to interview him as Brighton boss, but also as Chelsea manager as well. And I really wanted to see him do well. And I mean that honestly. And you never like to see a nice person lose their job. And that essentially is what's happened here.
Yeah.
But when he took over Chelsea, they were 6th in the table. That wasn't seen as good enough at the time. And now they're 11th. Mm-hmm. So look, the writing was on the wall. I just think that, as you've both pointed out, it's such a mess there. I still don't even know if he knows his best team. I mean, playing Reece James in a back three at the weekend, it's just when you see things like that and you're just a bit like, is he still trying to work out?
Well, he never had any consistency in his selections, and
that's
I think,
quite common for him, though. That's quite normal.
It is, and I think that works when you are someone who the whole club revolves around, where you build up that trust. A team like Brighton and Östersunds before that, and the job he did with Östersunds was remarkable, and automatically people are going to buy into that. This is the success he's continuing to have. We need to follow him here and everything will be fine. That's not going to happen at Chelsea, no way. And I think if you look at Chelsea's in a more kind of general point, I know that under Tuchel they won the Champions League and they had some success. Tuchel aside, the last 3 or 4 appointments, I don't know if they've been that great. But then having said that, Chelsea turn over managers so often.
Yeah.
They seem to pick up trophies. Like, you can think of Sarri winning the Europa League, and think of Di Matteo winning the Champions League, and think of Tuchel winning the Champions League. But these players, there's never any real legacy thing there since Mourinho, really. And then when you look at Mourinho, he was only there for 3 years the first time, and then 2 years again, just under 2 years, I think, after that. So it's a weird old thing at that club. It's how they tend to do things.
And you say that, but the interesting thing is we don't know that if that is going to continue, do we? Because that was definitely the case under Abramovich. But this is actually far more chaotic. I mean,
I think it is going to continue.
It wasn't really. You think they'll still pick up trophies here and there, and it will be kind of business as usual?
I don't know if they'll pick up trophies here and there because the landscape's changed. But I think the only way I can describe it is for those people listening to this show in the US, this is what British football fans think of when they think of an American owner. This is what they think is going to happen, and this is what they're frightened of. And I think there's nothing to suggest that he's going to calm down, because he isn't showing that he will.
He's laid the foundations for this chaos to continue by bringing in a lot of players on these 8-year contracts. So, I mean, we all know how new managers work. They want to come in, they want to mould the squad themselves. Sometimes they have to move some players on, bring some new players in. They're in a position where they have to sell players now. And it's you know what it reminds me of? This idea that the 8-year contracts are a way around amortization. It's quite an extreme example. Do you remember when North Korea took an outfield player to the World Cup and registered him as a goalkeeper, thinking they'd sneak an extra player in, and FIFA were like, well, obviously you can't do that. It's kind of like that. So they don't really understand how it works for whatever reason, so they've made this ridiculous decision.
If you start a point by saying this is quite an extreme example, pause.
North Korea.
That's the equivalent of a bit arguing with someone on the internet and just saying Adolf Hitler.
Yeah. Thanks for watching a clip from the Football Ramble podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a video. And if you're feeling extra generous, why don't you like this video? Why don't you like this video?